Indie animation. A dynamic, diverse realm of content, often freely available online. Animation crafted by the people, for the people. Art free from the clutches of profit motives and the desperation for mass market appeal. Times are strange right now over in the mainstream animation industry. Project cancellations, strikes, studio shutdowns. We stand on shaky ground. Meanwhile, indie animation looks a little something like... Yeah, indie animation is pretty cool. So cool, in fact, that it really does seem to be taking over the internet and beyond. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Before I get any further, we need to figure out what indie animation even means. Indie, short for independent, typically denotes something not affiliated with a large organization. The term is most commonly associated with music, referencing artists whose work is recorded, promoted, and distributed without the help of a record label. Much like indie music, indie animation is created without the help of studios, networks, production companies, and so on. One thing indie isn't is a description of a project's style or theme. Seriously, all it defines is the project's independence from corporate influence, and that's not very descriptive. From solo teens doodling on iPads and posting to TikTok to 100-people productions, the spectrum of what's deemed indie is as vast as the universe of animation itself. We need to make sure that each project is treated with more nuance, apples and oranges or whatever. Chances are, if you're here, you are no stranger to animation, indie included. If you're a part of my generation, you probably spent your early teens watching ASDF movies, Salad Fingers, or Don't Hug Me, I'm Scared. Perhaps you've been enthralled by CalArts and Goblin's short films, or consumed countless fan animations for games like Five Nights at Freddy's and Undertale. Maybe you're more familiar with the chaos of Newgrounds, relishing in the earlier days of Egoraptor, Oni, Rice Pirate, and Psychic Pebbles. All these people and projects share a crucial element. They weren't bankrolled by major networks or studios, and many began as solo endeavors. Another thing in common with many of these people is that just because they started indie doesn't mean they stayed there, and just because they've been mainstream doesn't mean they've left the indie world entirely. The two halves of the animation industry are deeply intertwined and always will be, but more on that in a future video. So, now you know what indie animation is, let's figure out where it all began. Animation is an art form that possibly dates back as far as 32,000 years ago. You heard me. It's had its fair share of invention and reinvention and re-reinvention. It's an ever-changing medium that has become a mainstay of entertainment. When you think animation, you're probably picturing Pixar, DreamWorks, Disney, and so forth, creators of childhood staples. As a result, it's pretty easy to assume these commercial behemoths have always been in charge. But the first major animated motion picture was Disney's Snow White, and that was in 1937. Now, that's not quite 32,000 years ago, is it? What I'm trying to say is that in the grand scheme of things, commercial animation is actually pretty new. On the other hand, Paleolithic cavemen in France were the first indie animators. The Lascaux caves of southwestern France are some of the earliest known examples of animated art. Dating back 17,000 years, many of the nearly 6,000 figures painted in these ancient caves are illustrated dynamically, meaning horses, reindeer, bison, and so forth were painted to appear in motion. These 5 stags are all possibly representations of the same stag in different stages of motion. It is theorized that each image would flash into focus at separate times, aided by the flickering nature of firelight. Dating even further back, all the way to 32,000 years ago, the Chauvet Cave in southeastern France has its own depiction of animals in motion. One of the cave's most famous panels, known as the Grand Panneau, likely illustrates the story of lions stalking their prey. In this image, a depiction of a rhinoceros appears to have 7 or 8 horns and a multitude of backs, but this is not a modern-day artist learning to draw in pen for the first time. This is possibly a superimposition of the rhino in different poses. So yeah, sequential image storytelling, also known as animation, has been around for a really, really long time. Let's fast forward, a couple tens of thousands of years to the 1650s. Dutch mathematician, physicist, engineer, astronomer, this guy is really smart, Christian Huygens has often been credited for inventing a device that, using lantern light and painted glass slides, projected moving images onto a wall. This is known as the magic lantern. This nifty little invention works by having a concave mirror behind a light source. This is then directed through glass slides that contain painted images. Some of these slides had mechanical elements, which allowed for a few different types of movement. Now you've got a man looking at a fly buzzing around him, a ship in the sea, a sleeping dude with mice jumping into his mouth. Sorry, what? Up until 1671, the magic lantern remained largely unknown, witnesses only really being those that knew Christian personally. Eventually, after sharing specs with engineers and optical instrument makers across France, Germany, and the UK, the invention was redesigned to make the projections brighter and sharper. On the one hand, it was shown in education settings, projecting botanical illustrations, astronomy diagrams, and schematics for early attempts at flight. On the other hand, people started getting creative and used the lantern for entertainment. By the 1730s, traveling showmen from France would tell all kinds of stories and share all manner of images. What was most popular, though, was a certain type of horror theatre known as phantasmagoria. This is where projections of demons, skeletons, ghosts, and other imaginative horrors were shown to an unsuspecting audience. This worked by hiding the lanterns behind the projection screen, which could be anything from translucent curtains to smoke. This came from a time where gothic stories and heightened emotions, which included fear, were all the rage. I guess this was the olden-day version of horror films? Perhaps you'd consider this primitive, especially by today's standards, but it's impressive nonetheless. Remember, this was a creation that preceded photography by nearly 200 years. Like the cave paintings, we see movement being used to enhance a narrative that is reflective of what people in those days frequently had on their minds. We're telling stories with limited but intentional movement. As the technology popularized, this became more corporate, or at least by 18th century standards. So because we're not really in indie territory anymore, let's move on. Skipping forward another century and a bit to 1827. British physician John Ayrton Paris has created a device that can blend 2 slides of a plane together, the thaumatrope. Touted as a kid's optical toy, the device is essentially a piece of card with different images on each side, and they're attached to 2 strings. When you twist the strings, the card spins quickly enough that the 2 sides blend into a single image. I'm sure many of you have made your own thaumatropes as kids, and though they're simple to make, they demonstrate a really important principle that is the basis of animation, and that is the persistence of vision. This is a phenomenon caused by the human eye's ability to only process up to 12 images per second. If you add more images, like, say, the 24 frame per second default within animation, the eye struggles to distinguish each separate image, and instead interprets it as motion. By spinning the thaumatrope card really fast, our eyes cannot focus from one side to another. Instead, it smooths into one image. Though this stage of discovery is important in the history of animation, one picture isn't really animating at this point, which brings us to a whole host of inventions, actually. 1833 and the invention of the phenixist. 1833 and the invention of the phenixistoscope. Congratulations, we have graduated from animating one frame to animating up to 16. This was invented in tandem by two smart chaps, Belgian physicist Joseph Plateau and geometrist Simon Stamfer. What you have is a disc on a vertical handle with a series of sequential images laid out radially and holes placed above each image. Now, hold your disc up to a mirror and give it a spin. Now, look at the mirror through those holes and kablamo! Animation! The holes are there to prevent the images from blurring into one, but do whatever you want, I'm not your dad. 1834, British mathematician William George Horner decided, me no likey disc, me like cylinder. And thus, the zoetrope was born. Similar in principle to the phenixistoscope, but now shaped like a revolving drum. The need for a mirror was removed. Instead, the viewer would peer through the slits to the opposite side of the cylinder. 1868, and Brit John Barnes Linnet, hey, he's from my hometown, patented the kineograph. Or to us plebeians, it's also known as a flipbook. This one's easy. Get a stack of paper and draw a new frame on each page. Now flip the pages to get moving images. This was one of the first instances of animation that didn't have to be a short loop. It can get a little janky and lose momentum if you don't have the right fingering technique, though. What? Much like the thaumatrope, many of us probably got our first taste of animating through flipbooks. My first ever run cycle was on one. Also, little side note, how cool is this? The Finnish passport has a flipbook moose. Oh my god, adorable. 1877, and French inventor Charles-Émile Renaud saw the zoetrope and thought, let's try this again, but make it fancy. Enter the praxinoscope. Monsieur Renaud removed the zoetrope slits and replaced them with an inner ring of mirrors. The broken up angles caused by the mirror panels recreated the shuttering needed for the illusion of movement to work. The innovation resulted in brighter and less distorted images. With all the tropes and scopes and graphs and sciencey people called John, it can be easy to get lost in this era of animation history. But that's okay. Regardless of if you remember each alternative name for each slightly different device, you now know a bit more about how animation got its start. There will be no pop quiz at the end of this video. Now, let's whiz through some honorable mention inventions, shall we? Max Fleischer, of Betty Boop and Popeye fame, invented another tool and subsequent technique, rotoscope. Max patented the device in 1917, so now animators could trace live-action reference which allowed for smoother, more naturalistic animations. Max Fleischer and his brother Dave were behind another important upgrade, and that is synchronized sound. From 1924, their studio, Inkwell Productions, created a series of shorts that were basically karaoke videos. It's called Song Cartoons, and it featured a little bouncing ball that guided viewers to sing along to some on-screen lyrics. In 1926, one of these shorts, My Old Kentucky Home, was the first instance of synchronized dialogue.
Follow the ball and join in, everybody.
If you want to watch the full video though, be warned, it does get super racist. Yeah. While two-strip color has been around since 1917, it was flawed and unreliable. After improving the camera design though, the 1930s saw a popularity increase in two-strip Technicolor film use. These films were made combining frames simultaneously filmed, one through a green channel and one through a red. This was mostly used in live-action film though, as was Technicolor's 3-strip film, which split footage into red, green, and blue strips. Whilst Disney is commonly associated with the multiplane camera, multiple other productions actually used a more primitive version first. More on that later. But for now, Snow White was the first use of the more elaborate Disney version of a multiplane camera. This is a device that allows glass panels to move up and down, thus creating a sense of depth and perspective. With the rise of the computer in the mid-20th century, using computers for art was bound to happen. In the 1940s, early digital art explorations began. The first film-related example was actually Alfred Hitchcock's 1958 film, Vertigo. Later, in the 1960s, digital animation made an emergence. The first computer-drawn film came from the Swedish Institute of Technology and featured a vector-drawn motorway from the perspective of a moving car. Whilst today this may look like a crappy nighttime dash cam thing, it actually was really impressive. In the pioneering days of computer animation, animations were more so made by mathematicians and scientists rather than people who could draw. The creation of this video required a specially made camera, specially made digital oscilloscope, and a lot of mapping of a lot of coordinates. Skipping to 1972, and Edwin Catmull, who ended up being a co-founder of Pixar, and his co-worker Fred Park created one of the earliest known examples of CGI animation. The University of Utah students worked with the school to create a computer-animated hand, a short showing Ed's left hand rotating in 3 dimensions. The film was made using a model of Ed's hand with polygons drawn all over it. These polygons were then painstakingly mapped out and translated to a computer. Alright, you might be wondering if categorizing all of this as indie animation is a bit of a stretch, but it genuinely isn't. Consider this. Indie animation has always embodied the spirit of individual discovery and the desire to imprint personal visions onto the world. These groundbreaking innovations, often rooted in science, are born from that same passion for innovation and expression. Given the technological advancements and wealth of knowledge we have today, it might seem challenging to pioneer the same way our predecessors did, but at its core, we're the same. It's truly inspiring to trace this journey and recognize the continuity and passion that has come throughout the years. If I've still not convinced you, okay, whatever, sounds like a you problem, but ooh, would you look at that? It's the first ever animated film. So, in 1891, this dude named Charles-Émile Reynaud, hang on a second, that name sounds familiar. Oh wait, that's right, he's the dude that invented the praxinoscope. We've already talked about him. Anyway, our buddy Charles created an animation titled Pauvre Pierrot, which translates to Poor Pete. He then published the film in 1892. Poor Pete is based on commedia dell'arte character archetypes. It follows Pete, a man who tries to sing to his love Columbina, but he is constantly interrupted by a mysterious invisible force. Turns out, the mysterious invisible force is actually another dude, Harlequin, who was already busy wooing Columbina and is trying to scare his competition away. This trailblazing marvel consisted of over 500 separate handmade paintings, all on gelatin sheets. The painted characters were surrounded by opaque, black paint. This was so only they would be visible when projected onto a backdrop. These gelatin sheets were then joined together into long strips with fabric, card, or leather. Some of these strips were as long as 45 meters, which is 148 feet. To project the film, Reynaud used another one of his inventions, the théâtre optique. In order for everything to run smoothly, the frames were flanked by holes that would then line up with pegs on the apparatus. This would hold the frames in place. To play the film required hand cranking by an operator with stamina, dexterity, and strong multitasking capabilities. While hand cranking for sometimes 20 minutes non-stop, you also had to fiddle with the backdrop slides to change those, but on top of that, as this was more of a live theatre experience rather than the modern cinema one, operators needed to respond to and feed off the energy of their live audiences. So that meant speeding up and slowing down playthrough, sometimes even rewinding for dramatic effect. This was all before the days of audio and film, so screenings were accompanied by live music and sound effects. Also, fun little fact, because this was the first recorded use of perforated film, a concept that became widely used in cinema throughout the 20th century, it means animation was actually the first form of film. That's right, animation precedes live action cinema. Originally, the film was 15 minutes long, but sadly only 4 minutes remain intact. Why is this? Well, for reasons unknown to us, in 1913 Reynaud destroyed his Théâtre Optique along with all his films. Only 2 portions of any of his films survived, and he gave one of each of those to his sons. I'd like to note here that this film, along with all the other inventions we've gone over today, is not a 100% confirmed first. Historically, documentation was far less prevalent than it is today. Even if something does get documented, who's to say that data won't go missing or get destroyed in the following decades and centuries? We can never know all of what was in the Library of Alexandria, and we may never know if there were animation innovations that predated what we've covered. This film, by another Frenchman who's also called Émile Cohl, is titled Phantasmagorie. This sub-2-minute animation is about a stick figure doing various activities, like plucking the feathers from a lady's comedically oversized hat. This mildly bizarre stream of consciousness-style film was made of 700 frames, each drawn on paper. Photos were then captured onto negative film, which is why the background is black and the lines are white. Though this film came out in 1908, a whole 17 years after Poor Pete, some argue that this is the first true animation because it utilizes what's now considered traditional hand-drawn animation techniques. Personally, I think that's BS because all forms of animation are still animation, whether they be stop motion, hand drawing, rotoscoping, painting on glass, and so forth. But anyway, Phantasmagorie likely took inspiration from a film that was released 2 years prior. British man James Stewart Blackton directed this short titled Humorous Phases of Funny Faces, and it's all about hats, clowns, dogs, and, well, funny faces. The film was made using a chalkboard and stop motion. I'm honestly not sure why historians prefer Phantasmagorie over this film, since they are technically rather similar and are both, by definition, animated. By the way, the definition of animation, I should probably have mentioned this sooner, is the technique of photographing successive drawings or positions of puppets or models to create an illusion of movement when the movie is shown as a sequence. But what do I know? I'm just a random 22-year-old YouTuber. Italian-born Argentinian Quirino Cristiani is considered to be behind the first ever animated feature film. In 1917, he created the 70-minute film El Apostol. Also, I'm so sorry again for mispronouncing Spanish now. The film was reportedly a political satire mocking then Argentinian president Hipólito Yrigoyen. It was made with cardboard cutouts designed by newspaper cartoonist Diogenes Tarboda. The film was funded by a man who owned a chain of movie theaters across the country and produced by another man. This film was lit. On fire. Yeah, so unfortunately that's why you're not seeing any footage from this film. El Apostol, along with all the other feature work Senor Cristiani went on to make, got destroyed in a blaze that took over his producer's film vault, and this happened in 1926. it seems this dude kept getting burned because there was actually a previous fire in 1918, and then most of the rest of his art got destroyed in even more fires in 1957 and 1961. It makes me wonder, was this accidental? Was it arson? This guy's work certainly bothered the political figures he mocked, but I couldn't find any information regarding if it was an accident, sabotage, intentionally self-started, and so on. Because of the film being commissioned by an outside source to rake in sales at the box office, I wouldn't exactly consider this film indie. By today's standards, it certainly would be. Senor Cristiani independently animated the vast majority of the film by himself, and it certainly went against the government's interests. So, I don't know. Would you say this film is in the spirit of indie animation? Perhaps. I'll leave it up to you to decide. One more film that I think is important to talk about is Lotte Reiniger's The Adventures of Prince Ahmed, or in the original German, Die Abenteuer des Prinzen Ahmed, from 1926. It is the oldest surviving animated feature film and is shadow puppet-like, paper cutout styled. A handful of well-known avant-garde animators helped Lotte out with the production. The film took around 3 years to make and made use of an early version of the multiplane camera. A sense of depth was created in scenes using glass panes and tissue paper, sand, soap, and so on. The film features color, which was actually added in post by painting directly onto the film strips. The story is based loosely on 1001 Nights, and this is where I come clean and say I actually haven't watched the film yet. But I'm sorry, I will, I promise. Anyway, from what I have read, it's about the various adventures of an Arabian prince. I swear I've read more than the title, but anyway. Alongside being one of the first animated features, it was also one of the first examples of queer representation in film. An openly gay couple is featured in the film, which is truly trailblazing for 1926. Naturally, this was criticized by audiences, but Lotte remained outspoken about her support of the LGBT community. From here through to 1937, most animation made would be deemed indie. This was the early days of animated cinema, a time before there was a clear path for artists to market their works to the mainstream. It was art for the sake of it. Little, if any, commercialization was in the way of creative expression. When writing this script, I'll be honest, I struggled to structure it out. I found myself getting carried away with the history of animation as a technology rather than focusing on the indie aspects. Either way, I hope it was interesting, but to try and avoid losing the core message of this video, I actually scrapped some of the history of entries. But if you want me to discuss even more films and inventions from centuries past, I have good news! The original script for this video, alongside my narration of it, will be available on my Patreon. If you are watching this video on the day of release, it may need another day or so to show up, but I promise you it'll be there. There are over 10 more entries that I found super interesting and at least peripherally relevant to animation innovation and indie animation. Perhaps someday I'll revisit the birth of cinema in a dedicated video, but for now, let's whiz through some more pioneering indie films that I consider classics. Married couple, John and Faith Hubley, made the animated film Moonbird in 1959 that went on to be the first independent animation to win an Oscar. It tells the story of two young boys going on an adventure in the middle of the night. The 1969 dark and comedic student film Bambi Meets Godzilla by Marv Newland is considered an iconic piece of independent cinema. Who wouldn't want to see an interaction between Bambi and Godzilla? Oh! Fritz the Cat is a black comedy that came out in 1972 and was actually the first animated film to be officially X-rated. Directed by industry veteran Ralph Bakshi, the story features old-school furries getting up to some naughty business. That's right, sexy anthropomorphic cats have been around much longer than you'd think. Alex Patterson, a student at CalArts in the mid-80s, animated a film titled Commuters. This short caught the attention of Warner Brothers executives, and they later repurposed it for a-ha's Train of Thought music video. This makes this an earlier example of the relationship between indie animation and the corporate world, a topic I'll be diving into in part 2 of this series. Adam Pesapane, known online as Pes, is a great example of stop-motion animation. His film Fresh Guacamole remains one of the most viewed indie animations of all time at an eye-watering 470 million views on YouTube. At just 1 minute and 40 seconds, it's also the shortest film to ever be nominated for an Oscar. And boom! We're back in the land of today, and my, how different it looks to cave paintings. Wait, okay, I want to actually talk about one last innovation, and this one is incredibly important, and that is the internet. Before the days of the World Wide Web, it was much harder to put your work out into the universe and to gain notoriety. Success was frequently reserved for somebodies who knew somebody, but with the birth of platforms such as Newgrounds, Albino Black Sheep, and DeviantArt, people could start sharing their work with anyone in the world. This was the catalyst for indie animation as we know it today. Without the internet, the animation landscape would likely be severely stunted and indie animation would be much harder to support. But more on that later. We interrupt this irregularly scheduled programming to talk about plushies! And me, but mostly plushies because today's video is sponsored by my plushie launch. And yeah, that's this guy, Meet Cheese, or Emmental, or Louise, like Cheese Louise, or like Mac and Cheese, you know, whatever name you choose. This little cheese creature is currently the only one of his kind on the entire planet. But with your help, we can change that. Cheese Plushie is up for pre-sale until the 30th of October, which is super soon, and I think you should buy one. Here's why. He makes a fantastic travel partner. I did a lot of flying this summer and I was using this guy as a pillow, and he is the best squishy companion for that. He also has an extendable neck that definitely isn't suspicious looking at all, and this is also your one and only chance to get this little guy. Cheese Tortoise is only going to be made once, and that's when the deadline is up, so don't miss your chance. In order to get him manufactured though, I need to hit 200 orders, which it's a lot and is super daunting what with the very few days I have left. It's honestly my fault though, because I did not promote him properly at all in the 4 weeks that I had of this campaign, and that's a big regret of mine, but it's a lesson I have learnt. I was meant to make this video a month ago and I've just been super behind and disorganized, and then I relied too heavily on Instagram, and that was a humbling experience, we'll put it that way. So I suppose this is a last-ditch effort and a slight cry for help, but if you are willing to help me out, that would mean the world to me. Don't worry though, if we don't hit 200 orders, then sadly this guy won't get made, but everybody will be issued refunds. If you would like a 15% discount, don't forget to use the code Meppity15, which is linked down below along with everything else. This whole experience getting to make one of my character designs a squishy and huggable reality has been truly incredible. I am incredibly thankful to the team at Gimme Swag for reaching out in the first place. And yeah, even if things don't work out this time, I've learnt a lot and I'm looking forward to the next adventure. Even if you aren't interested in this little guy, maybe one of your friends or your family members are. I highly encourage you spread the word while you can. Okay, maybe plushies aren't your thing, but what about other cool merch? My store, Meppity.shop, is filled with all kinds of goodies like this t-shirt that says, consistently inconsistent, and I did my makeup to match because why not? Or how about this top that says, I never finish anything? Or maybe this beanie that is a reminder to save your files? I also have totes, keychains, stickers, magnets, prints, washi tape, and so much more. There's also freebies over there, like a sampler of what you'd get as a Patreon member, and I even offer my critique service through my shop. So, what are you waiting for? Go check it out!
If you could have any animal, what would it be?
I'd like to have a pet cheese.
That's not an animal.
If I could have any animal, I'd like to have cheese.
You want an animal?
Please.
Please.
Take his neck for you, look after you in the blue.
Go back to the next thing.
Hooks and I love it.
Toys now?
Oh, if I could have any animal, I'd have this plushie.
And that's enough from me. Back to also me. All these centuries of creativity have not only given way to a myriad of artistic techniques, but also narrative structures, operational structures, and so on. Animation is incredibly flexible in that it can be a 1 or 100 person project. It can be a 90-minute feature film or a series of 10-second bite-sized clips. We can tell stories that make us laugh, cry, squirm with fear or pleasure. Some expose our greatest regrets or deepest desires. Animation can be anything, so how do we break it down? What are the many forms of indie animation? Let's take a look at the different ways indie projects come to be. Student films. There are a range of films from the last few decades, some made by teams of classmates, others made solo. Here are a few of the most famous ones.
There's a man in the woods.
By Jacob Straline, who went to Cal Arts. A beautiful and dark, fable-like story told with poetry. I've always been a sucker for poetry stories. This is one of the first Cal Arts films I saw and helped solidify my decision to apply to go to this school. Butter Lover by Kinga Nagorka from SVA. Dude, it blew my mind when I realized that Moist Critical was the voice actor for this film.
Wow, dude, wow, you are seriously creeping me out.
Welcome to Hell, Erica Webster from Kansas City Art Institute. I remember watching this film when I was around 14. I think this was the beginning of many people's love for twinks in hellish landscapes. Twins in Paradise, Victoria Vincent, another Cal Arts student. Vune, or Victoria Vincent, blew up from her Cal Arts student films, and this was her thesis. I remember sitting in the labs doing my own thing when her class came in and she pitched her boards for them. It was awesome seeing her casually make something so genius right in front of my eyes. Diamond Jack by Rachel Kim, another Cal Arts student. Arguably one of the most viewed Cal Arts films out there, this one goes out to all the lovers of chase scenes and musicals. Best Friend. This is a Gobelins short by Nicolas Olivieri, Chagny, Juliana De Luca, Varun Nair, and David Feliu. This is a gorgeous film from the French animation school Gobelins. The quality of this one beats many mainstream productions. It's really impressive. Kiwi by Doni Pamedi from SVA. This 2006 short is definitely a slightly traumatic core memory from my childhood. Kiwi was a master's thesis that is one of the oldest videos on YouTube to have gone viral. I cried so hard the first time I watched this Kiwi learn to fly, and maybe you will too, who knows. In a Heartbeat by Beth David and Esteban Bravo from Ringling. One of the biggest CG films in recent years, this love story between two schoolboys broke the internet when it first came out. It's now at 49 million views, and that is no joke. If on the off chance you haven't seen any of the films I mentioned today, don't worry, it is all listed in a document that's available in the description. Actually, in fact, every single film I have talked about will be linked down below. Did you notice how many of these student films had gay love stories or were generally LGBTQ+ positive? Yeah, that's a really positive symptom of the indie animation landscape, and it's something I'm going to be covering in the next installment of this series. Why are student films so significant? For many, they serve as an initial introduction to the schools that they might attend. It's becoming increasingly common for young teens, as young as 13 in my case, to set their sights on specific colleges, and this is influenced by memorable student films that they encountered. I've been aware of CalArts since my early teens thanks to Gravity Falls, however, it was the array of captivating films produced by the character animation program students that sealed my decision to apply. As young creatives discover their passion for specific schools earlier, they gain a deeper understanding of what these institutions value. This early exposure allows them to hone their skills more rapidly, often surpassing the level of the people that inspired them when they were in that position. Independent artists. Student films aren't the only independent films out there that gain recognition. Some artists never had a formal education, or they continued to make independent work long after their student days. Either way, a big hitter like Pess's Fresh Guacamole comes to mind. While most artists in this category generate a large following and success with subsequent films, I think the difference between this category and the following one is what is overall more famous. Is it you, or is it your art? While the previous set of creators are perhaps more celebrated for one specific project, others amass dedicated fan bases awaiting every single release. There is often crossover with the student film section because many artists' first chance to really make it is through their schoolwork, such as Vyun. Known for his gross-out horror animation and commentary on current internet drama, Hunter Hancock, known online as Meat Canyon, is a powerhouse. He has established a system allowing him to make creations with the aid of small teams of freelance artists. He's expressed struggles with burnout, but still manages to put out high-quality content on a really regular basis.
Ooh, doesn't this look good?
Australian animator Felix Colgrave is a total legend that makes all kinds of quirky work ranging from his surreal film Double King to music videos to stories relating to Australian wildlife. He doesn't put out work nearly as often as Papa Meat, but is just as popular. Worthy Kids, or Ian Worthington, has created all manner of Blender-made films. His earlier works, which have been privated, were actually Homestuck fan art, which then evolved into comedy skits based on the cultural zeitgeist, namely Witches on Tinder. These days, he makes a range of independent shorts, often accompanied by his own music, plus his ever-popular series Big Top Burger. There's so many other big-name artists out there that I just haven't had time to mention, like Kiki Flipnote, Mike Inell, Joel G, Joel Haver, Jack Stauber. Then there's the big-name storytime animators like Jaden Animations. This category goes to show how valuable it can be to have a unique voice. While schools typically encourage artists to be able to draw in others' art styles, these people gain recognition for saying "fuck that" and repeatedly doing their own thing. These people can become so independently successful that, for example, Ian Worthington turns down major opportunities on a semi-regular basis. These guys are proof that you can work for yourself and that people do enjoy the weird and the wild. Pilots and Kickstarter projects. These are stories that are massively dependent on community support. After seeing the success of the Infinity Train pilot, Cartoon Network greenlit the show. Now, countless others want to follow in its footsteps and create their own pilots. Lackadaisy by Iron Circus is a pretty recent pilot, one that came out a few months ago in the year 2023, and is a 1920s Prohibition-era themed story that is about anthropomorphic cats. It is massively popular already, and they are continuing to reach stretch goals with their crowdfunding. Long Gulch. Sorry. Long Gone Gulch is an independent animated pilot episode that was funded through Kickstarter. It's a Western fantasy comedy created by Zach Bellissimo and Tara Billinger. Both have backgrounds working in the animation industry, including contributions to shows like Wander Over Yonder and Victor and Valentino. While nothing has come of the 2021 pilot so far, sometimes these things just do take years to get picked up. I wish this project the best. The Amazing Digital Circus by Gooseworks and the Glitch Team. The Amazing Digital Circus is a pilot hot off the presses. As of recording this, it actually came out only 3 days ago. This mind-bending, reality-warping pilot is already at over 7 million views. Digital Circus asked the question, what if it was Toy Story, but everyone was a jerk? The project was self-funded by Glitch, an Australian ever-growing independent studio that already has popular work under its belt like Murder Drones. Many of these projects emerge without pilots ready and instead rely on their audience to crowdfund one. While not a pilot that exists yet, Boxtown is a project by Charlie Gavin of Bandit Mill Animation, and it's in the earlier stages of crowdfunding. So far, we have a project pitch, short clips, and big-name voice actors Tara Strong and Alex Hirsch to win audiences over. It got its start on Indiegogo and is looking for donations to become an animated web series. The project is described as an adult animated show following Tim, a so-so detective with a knack for conning both clients and suspects alike, as he teams up with Bill, a squishable and earnest orphan obsessed with true crime. The Lovers. Though not a pilot for a series, but rather a film, this is an example of projects that are already surrounded by massive hype and are coming into existence because of crowdfunding. Studio Heartbreak is behind this fishy frenzy. What's cool here is that people can generate massive interest without even having anything huge to show. Comics, illustrations, occasional pencil tests, and so on can be enough to win audiences over. Not everyone has the time or money to fully animate something, but that shouldn't stop the story from emerging in other forms. Perhaps this is your sign. Don't wait for your pilot to materialize out of nothing. Start building your fanbase now with the smaller, more manageable stuff. Speaking of fans, they are a category in their own right. Memes, alternative universes, any form of homage to pre-existing material is a huge sub-ecosystem of the indie world. Think of how many artists got their start with FNAF animations, or Heather's animatics, or Warrior Cats music videos, and so on. I mean, the reason my YouTube channel came to be was because I posted a Gorillaz fan animatic when I was 16. A prime example of a fanbase within a fanbase is Sadist, an animator with a whopping 2.85 million subscribers. She gained notoriety in the Dream SMP Minecraft world. Minecraft is the reason Dream became so famous, and Dream is the reason Sadist became so famous. Sadist has generated and maintained her popularity by creating derivative work based on others' media. Let me be super duper clear though, derivative is not an insult. Almost all forms of art and storytelling take inspiration from other works. It's a fascinating way to build community and generate new ideas. Sadist worked something pre-existing into something new and interesting, and that is why every single one of her videos has over 1 million views. While some artists work alone, and others work together to create one vision, there is a really fun crossover point. Ever heard of maps? And no, I'm not talking about pieces of paper that stop you getting lost or, oh, God forbid, the kiddie diddlers who are trying to pretend that their interests aren't depraved. I'm talking about multi-animator projects. This is usually an offshoot of the fan art category and involves multiple artists working to create one story, but rather than developing a universal style or color palette or even voice cast, every artist is given relatively free rein of an allocated segment of the story. Warrior Cats. I wasn't one of the Warrior Cats kiddos growing up, but it's amazing to see so many teenagers come together for their love of books about angsty cats. Some of these projects are truly impressive, even ignoring the fact that they're usually organized by kids who have never worked in a professional environment. I know quite a few really phenomenal artists who got their start in Warrior Cats animations. Shrek Retold. A legendary piece of the internet directed by Grant Dufresne, Shrek Retold is a 2018 multidisciplinary feat that was the combined work of over 200 individuals. Every shot of the original Shrek movie was recreated, sometimes with 2D animation, sometimes 3D animation, sometimes puppets, and even live action. Voices were redone too, and the production was an all-around chaotic marvel that let each individual artist's voice shine through. Maps are a fantastic way to find and develop community. It provides a chance to show off your style and skills whilst developing soft skills such as teamwork and a knowledge of the animation pipeline. Interactive media. While not pure animation, I wanted to shout out some of our closely related cousins. The following categories all have one thing in common. They require input from the viewer. Audience participation, if you will. Video games. Though behemoths in their own right now, we cannot forget the indie roots of Toby Fox's Undertale and Scott Cawthon's Five Nights at Freddy's, which, by the way, how cool is it that a big-ass FNAF film is coming out this month with Jim Henson-made actual animatronics? My 15-year-old heart fluttered when I saw a gigantic FNAF billboard in downtown LA the other day. I don't care how good or bad the film will end up being, it's just really cool to see how this small game grew into something so massive. Multimedia stories are ones where there can be more than one form of storytelling. Petscop is a horror web series by Tony Domenico that falls into this category. The story is of a forgotten video game being played by someone doing a Let's Play series on YouTube. It's like a form of invisible theatre where at first it's unclear what's fiction and what's reality. Another non-animated but equally deserving of a mention project is Mystery Flesh Pit National Park, a story by Trevor Roberts that is told by piecing together various artifacts and documents from an alternative 20th century. He hand-wrote and drew everything and it's on his Tumblr page, and it's a really fascinating way of making the audience do the figuring out, while also just looking at pretty things. ARGs, or alternate reality games, are a fascinating form of storytelling that is a subcategory of multimedia. Often associated with analog horror, it's a concept that involves secrets, puzzle solving, and often traipsing around the internet and beyond. Fans have to work together, sometimes physically having to go to different parts of the world to find clues and discover a hidden story. Storytelling like this has always interested me and is something I greatly aspire to make myself someday. The blur between fiction and reality is one of the most interesting things in the world to me, in my humble opinion, or maybe I just like giving myself existential crises? These are all unique forms of storytelling that bypass linear narratives. It's a wonderful way to explore other skill sets such as coding and puzzle making. This subset of projects create engagement, which in turn boosts their popularity. Give us cool characters and an interesting story, and you're going in a good direction. But give us hidden lore, missing puzzle pieces, and cross-platform secrets on top of that, and bam! You have a beast with a ravenous fan base obsessed with fan theories, puzzle solving, and eager consumption of Wendigoon videos. Series. Animated series are usually made by small teams rather than individuals. This is because an entire series is usually a way bigger commitment than one-off shorts, animatics, etc. These are either slow burn projects or ones where there is an entire team on payroll, so the scale still varies even within this subset. Hell of a Boss is certainly one of the biggest and most popular ongoing series. Vivzy Pop wanted to expand upon the world of Hazbin Hotel on her own terms, at her own pace, with the creation of this show. This is a genius move to provide content and keep her audience interested, while Hazbin remains under the cover of NDAs. This is a production that has literally hundreds of people involved, not something the vast majority of small artists have access to, but it pays off. Episodes come out every few months, which is honestly better than some large-scale studio productions. Starbarians. In contrast to the sheer massiveness of Hell of a Boss, Harry Partridge's Starbarians has taken 11 years to get 3.5 episodes out. But Harry is essentially a one-man studio. For him to put out not only this raunchy spacefaring series, but plenty of other work over the last decade is an impressive feat. And it's all so well written, designed, and animated. I think because it's so difficult for one person to make these things, he has now committed to making a comic instead and is looking for crowdfunding on that. Indie animated series are a reminder that you truly do not need a major studio to make dreams happen. It's no easy feat, though. I think anyone who feels inspired by these indie series should know that it takes not only motivation, but networking, business acumen, and the utmost discipline. This is a task fit for only the most determined. So, if you care about your story, don't neglect all the other requirements for being a storyteller. Drawing well will only get you so far. Because indie animation, by definition, doesn't rely on the big corporations and their money to become successful, they grow their popularity and funding through other means. Social media! No surprises that the digital age is why indie animation keeps going viral. Here's a breakdown of the ways social media has contributed to this surge. Global visibility. Social media transcends geographical barriers, allowing indie animators to reach a global audience that was previously inaccessible. This exposure brings attention to unique projects that might not have gained traction through traditional channels. This also opens the door for anyone to post. If you can have a social media account, you can post your indie projects. So, artists as young as 13, or I guess younger if their parents haven't been keeping an eye on them, have potential to be seen by anyone in the world. Both a beautiful and rather daunting prospect. Direct audience engagement. Platforms like YouTube, X, Instagram, and TikTok enable indie animators to directly engage with their audience. It makes sense that these days, people feel far more connected to content creators than A-list celebrities. Content creators feel much more accessible because they tend to be the ones actually running their social media pages. They can like comments, reply to fans, and reshare fan art that they enjoy. The connection to creators, and therefore projects they're working on, feels more personal, leading to fans becoming more attached. Creators can also share behind-the-scenes content, sketches, and updates, which help solidify the bond between creator and captivated fan. Often, mainstream projects are unable to share any juicy extras because of the NDAs they're under. So sometimes, we get nothing from mainstream productions for years at a time. Instant feedback and iteration. Speaking of extra content, social media provides a rapid feedback loop for creators. Animators can share their work in progress, receive critique, and make iterative improvements based on audience reactions. This real-time engagement, like test screenings in the corporate world, can enhance the quality of projects. However, unlike test screenings, creators' audiences are more tailored and can give feedback as often as required. Building a brand and persona. Social media allows animators to build a personal brand and establish a distinct online persona. This branding helps creators stand out, becoming recognizable and fostering a devoted following interested in their unique content. A brand isn't just a logo and a few colors, though. It's a creator's art style, style of writing, the topics discussed, and the themes explored. Really fleshing out a creator or a project's image ensures the right audience is reached. Promotion and teasers. Social media serves as a platform for teaser trailers, sneak peeks, and promotional campaigns for upcoming projects. This generates anticipation and excitement among the audience, ensuring receptive viewership upon release. This can also lean into branding because there's so many ways to promote content. Do you go meme heavy? Is it going to be a well-edited documentary style thing? Or are you platforming the cast and crew in goofy podcasts? Do you make ominous trailers that hint at hidden lore and generate fan theories? Viral potential. Related to building a brand and getting names out there, a single, well-timed tweet, post, or video can go viral and catapult an indie animator into the spotlight. Viral content attracts attention from fans, fellow creators, and even media outlets. This leads to increased visibility. Bypassing gatekeepers. The animation industry is rife with gatekeeping, but this might be bypassed through social media. Creators can showcase their work directly to audiences, potentially gaining recognition and even partnerships with studios, all this without having to attend fancy art schools, living in LA, and without needing to impress execs with tastes and sensibilities of the middle-aged white man variety. Networking and collaboration. Indie animators can connect with peers, potential collaborators, and mentors within the industry through social media platforms. This networking fosters opportunities for collaborations, partnerships, and knowledge exchange. No longer is art school the only way in. Artistic freedom and authenticity. Social media encourages animators to express their individuality and authenticity. This is essential in a landscape where audiences seek genuine connections and innovative storytelling that might not conform to traditional norms. Gone are the days of forcibly contorting your story to fit the expectation of others. This reminds me, did you know that in Star vs. the Forces of Evil, the high school element was demanded by Disney, so kids could find the show more relatable or whatever? This was against the wishes of show creator Darren Nefsey, but alongside many other changes to her original ideas, the network didn't give her any choice. Indie creators? Nah, we can do what we want. Crowdfunding platforms. One of the biggest gatekeepy elements of mainstream animation is funding. But in recent decades, platforms like Kickstarter, Indiegogo, and Patreon have become an essential alternative for indie projects. Social media serves as a promotional tool to drive potential backers to these crowdfunding campaigns, enabling creators to bring their visions to life. In essence, social media empowers indie animators to be their own marketers, funders, and publicists. It offers a level playing field where creativity, talent, and dedication can shine regardless of the creator's background or resources. So, as you can tell, social media has been a game changer, especially when creators are free from NDAs and hovering execs. It's one of the big reasons why so many indie animations are thriving. When creators are in control of what they can share and when, they can be much more strategic about posting online to generate a buzz. On the other hand, a bunch of shows from big-name studios are biting the dust. Like, there are shows on Netflix that had crazy potential, but I only found out about them after they got axed. And why did this happen? Because Netflix dropped the ball on letting people know these gems even existed. It's heartbreaking to see creators' passion projects fizzle out because the studio just couldn't market it properly, if at all. Most times, the creators behind the shows have zero say in how their work gets promoted. A few years back, I would get bombarded with Riverdale ads, but City of Ghosts? Barely heard a peep. I never watched Riverdale, but I certainly watched stuff similar to City of Ghosts. But the algorithm didn't care, they didn't show it to me anyway. It does make sense, though. While individual creators can more freely play around and make mistakes, large organizations are slow and cumbersome for the sake of bureaucracy. It makes it difficult to adapt marketing strategies quickly in response to audience reception or trends, but it's just a risk these companies simply cannot take. On top of that, while most indie creators are typically focused on promoting one project, big companies have hundreds. They just don't have the bandwidth to give each production the attention it deserves. Quick sidebar, have you ever wondered why Illumination's franchises like Despicable Me are so huge? I mean, Despicable Me is the highest grossing animated movie franchise of all time. Bigger than Shrek, Toy Story, Ice Age, and so on? Well, it is all about that marketing muscle, baby. And also having a family-friendly appeal and, a young audience, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, when Illumination drops a new movie, it is everywhere. They team up with others like Lego, Bathing Ape, IHOP, HelloFresh, even The Office. Bro, last year I remember opening the HelloFresh website to pick next week's meals, and I got jump scared by these monstrosities. Also, HelloFresh, please sponsor me. I love you. I've been using you for 3 years. Illumination has a specialized creative squad cranking out original animations just for promos. Fun fact, a lot of their film directors actually get their directorial start in the marketing department. Illumination also knows its audience well. The gentle minions trend, while started by some Australian teens, was coined and capitalized upon the official Minions TikTok account. By the way, if you don't know, gentle minions was a trend when the most recent film Minions Rise of Gru came out, where attendees would go to the cinema dressed in business suits. It was kind of bizarre and wild and was shutting down cinemas left, right, and center, but frankly, I think it's hilarious. Teenagers, you guys are funny. Whether you're a fan of Illumination or not, you have got to admit it's a genius move. Despite being a slightly smaller studio compared to the other big guys, Illumination's impact on animation is nothing short of massive. Now that I think about it, I would love to make a video about the unexpected genius of this studio. Let me know if this is something you'd be interested in watching. All this to say, marketing is vital to any modern-day production success, indie or not. So, if you're an indie animator looking to get your work out to the masses, pay attention to all the strategies out there. Watch trends, find gaps in the market, study all the algorithms. Being a good artist and storyteller can only get you so far, but reaching your audience can launch you into the stratosphere. As a quick little example, I have actually been posting more frequently on Instagram lately. Though this was initially to promote my cheese plushie, which, by the way, there's only a few days left, please, please, please buy my cheese plushie. I have seen all kinds of other success. By posting, frankly, kind of low-effort reels that are trends, I have gained 10,000 followers in around 2 weeks. Which is mind-blowing to me because it took me 8 years to get the other 40,000 of my followers. So yeah, you don't even have to do much, you just have to keep an eye on what the internet wants from you. Regardless of money, industry presence, or any other factor, art has been and always will be an intrinsic part of human nature. We're innately curious, overflowing with creativity. Everything that is made by our hands helps shape the world. If we flip through the pages of history, we see that indie animation has often stood toe-to-toe with, if not outshone, mainstream animation. Credit where credit is due, the mainstream realm has its groundbreaking moments and rakes in huge money, but indie animation? It's been the quiet trailblazer since art's inception. And there's no sign of it slowing down. In fact, we are in the midst of an indie animation boom. Thanks to an ever-increasing wealth of resources like YouTube tutorials, complementary software like Blender, or affordable apps like the upcoming Procreate Dreams, the sky's the limit. Truly, anyone can create animation and share their story with the world. And I find that beautiful. So, that brings us to the end of part 1 of my Indie Animation Revolution series. This is just the prologue. I cannot wait to show you what's next. Get ready to hear more about how indie animation can save us from a crumbling mainstream industry. If you're watching this at the time of upload, expect part 2 to be out in the coming 2-3 weeks. Hopefully. Honestly, I don't know. After 6 years of doing this, I still despise editing, but I'm too stubborn to hire someone to do it for me. Lol. Anyway. If you liked today's video, be sure to subscribe and turn the notification bell on. You're gonna need it because my upload schedule is consistently inconsistent. Why not also leave a comment down below? What is your favorite indie animated project and how did you discover it? Don't forget to buy my cheese plushie while you still can. It'd really mean a lot to me and it is only available before the end of October. If you want other ways to support me, don't forget to follow me on my other social media. I am Meppity on all platforms and it's all linked in the description. I've also got a Discord server. It's a cute little community where people enjoy sharing art and participating in weekly activities. Why not also support me on Patreon? From just $1, you get early access to all my YouTube videos, as well as 15% off merch and 20% off the plushie. Higher tiers get access to exclusive art, Photoshop files, speed paints with voiceover, behind-the-scenes material from my upcoming film Fireworks, video scripts in PDF form, including this video, and more. Your support enables me to keep making content like this, so I couldn't be more thankful for my current patrons. Speaking of, here they are! Danny Manique, Mercedes Martinez, Miriam Huot, Povorensky, Yo-Yo Zhu, Annie Phelan, Daria Del Monaco, Gumbo, Marty, Natalia Bednerova, The Only Body, Tyler Haggerty, Vincent Soderberg, Yulia, Cass, and Logan Barrios. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day, night, morning, evening, wherever you are, and I'll see you soon. Bye! And that's enough from me. Back to also me. Okay. Let's give that a shot.